Welcome to the Pan Am Podcast, brought to you by the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York. This podcast and our museum are dedicated to celebrating the legacy of the world's most iconic airline, Pan American World Airways. My name is Tom Betty, and I'm the host of this program. Thank you for joining us. The Pan Am Museum Foundation is a non-profit organization. Please visit our website for more information at thepanammuseum.org. Again, our website is thepanammuseum.org. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. If you are using Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving a review. It will help others discover this program. This podcast is sponsored by the generous personal support of Mr. Adam Aaron, the CEO and chairman of AMC Theaters. He is also president of our sister organization, the Pan Am Historical Foundation. If you're not familiar with Pan Am, welcome. We are honored to have you here and for you to learn about what we're all about. If you already know of Pan Am, worked for or flown on the airline, or just love our history, it's good to be with you again. So with that, let's get this episode in the air, so to speak. Welcome aboard your Pan American Jet Clipper. In this episode, we are joined by Gary Bartelings, a supporter of the Pan Am Museum and founder and managing director of Bartlings, a company dedicated to unique travel experiences by private jet. We also welcome back to the program our good friend Becky Sprecher. Becky has been a frequent guest and contributor to this podcast. She'll bring great history into the flying boats of the 1930s and insight into Pan Am's legendary passenger service to this episode. From June 16, 2025 to June 28, 2025, Pan Am returns to the sky for an exclusive journey for 50 intrepid voyagers aboard a luxurious and modern private 757 aircraft with Pan Am livery. You heard that right. There will be a Pan Am plane with a Pan Am logo on the tail back in the air. This exclusive trip, called Tracing the Transatlantic, will follow some of Pan Am's original flying boat routes across the Atlantic Ocean with stops in New York, Bermuda, Lisbon, Marseille, London, and Foynes. Let's learn more about reliving a golden age of travel by listening to a minute promo about this incredible trip.
For most of the 20th century, Pan American World Airways ruled the skies, shrank the globe, and led the way in evolution of commercial aviation worldwide. Nothing compares flying aboard a Pan American flight. Glamour, premium customer service, traveling to far-flung exotic locations to define the allure of Pan Am and set the standard for the industry. Join this unique celebration of the Pan American World Airways legacy, tracing their transatlantic routes. We take this chartered aircraft,
JFK to Bermuda, to Marseille, to Lisbon, to London, to Ireland, all in unparalleled luxury and comfort. We've been doing this for almost 10 years, traveling the world on a private aircraft. It's the only way to see the world. It's the best way to see the world. Come and join us.
For more information, visit criteriontravel.com/Pan Am. There is a link in the episode description to this website to learn more. This trip is certainly a private air journey for the ages. Founded in 2015, Bartlings was incorporated to provide discerning travel companies access to extensive expertise and knowledge to create incredible and exclusive trips for customers. Bartlings has been involved in the operation of a variety of tours by privately chartered aircraft to all corners of the globe, from small 12-guest tours to larger groups of 250 guests on a private 747. Their aim is to create unique experiences throughout the world, allowing guests to connect with other cultures, visit incredible sites, both natural and man-made, and to develop a deeper understanding and appreciation of the world we all inhabit. Our guest, Gary Bartelings, grew up in the Netherlands. His original career plan was to study at hotel school. However, he changed his mind and wanted to broaden his education to tourism. He started his travel career in 1987 with Qantas Airways in Amsterdam after completing his education. During his career, he has been involved in everything from telephone sales to aircraft dispatch, brochure production to contract negotiation, crisis management to tour managing, public speaking to PR relationships, and so on. Having had the privilege to travel extensively around the world, he believes there is no better way to connect people and cultures than through understanding, acceptance, and respect. The best way to achieve that is to travel, to visit, to interact, and to learn. He has a passion for travel in all its shapes and forms. He has explored Asia donning a backpack, drove a classic car through southern India to raise money for charity, and at the other end of the scale, visited famous monuments of humanity, traveling by private jet, and each experience strengthens his appreciation of the world we live in. Thank you very much for coming on the program, Gary and Becky. Gary, let's start with you. I'm reading your bio, and it says born in Nigeria. Let's start there.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's an honor to be on the program and to be able to talk to you and Becky today. You're right. Yes, I was born in Nigeria a long time ago now. My father was working in Nigeria at the time, and so my sister and I were both born there, but it was only for a short time. We were there for about 4 years before we returned to the Netherlands because I'm a Dutch national. And I guess you can say that was my first flight. And that stayed with me. And eventually I ended up in aviation.
What airline was that, Nigeria to the Netherlands?
That was KLM, Dutch Royal Airlines. And of course, I later on in my career worked for Qantas Airways. And the two airlines, funnily enough, always used to compete with who was the first proper airline. Was it Qantas or was it KLM? And KLM at the time always used to say, well, we're blue. We had the first choice because the sky is blue. We flew in the sky, so it must be KLM. Anyway.
So that's the bug of travel, was when you were 4 years old. Tell us how that kind of grew.
Bug of travel. And later on in life, I realized it was really my mum. Sadly, she passed away, but she was the real traveler between my parents. And when I grew up, I was actually most of my life, my younger life, I lived in the Netherlands, of course, and family holidays were within Europe. Not so much flying, because flying was considered expensive in those days. I'm talking in the 70s. And a lot of it was driving, because in living in the Netherlands, you jumped in the car, you drove to Italy or France to go on your annual vacation, as you would call it in the US. But I always was bewildered and intrigued by travel. I always found it fascinating. You can go to a different country, hear a different language. In those days, had a different currency, and fascinated me. And as I grew up and had to make a decision, I thought I was going to go to the hotel school because that sounded a bit cool. They weren't that interested in me. And so I thought, well, actually, tourism is a bit broader. There's a bit more different elements to it. Let's get into tourism, and that's what I studied, tourism, and then my very first job was in aviation. So whilst I liked flying, I wasn't that familiar with it. But as many people have said to me since, once you start in aviation, you can't let go.
I'd just like to add to what Gary said, that once you get the bug and you go places, when it's wheels up, and you get that excitement of we're going someplace new, we're going to learn someplace new, it never leaves you.
So Gary, you now work for the travel industry in your earlier days. Tell us a little bit about where you worked and also tell us about your first Pan Am flight.
So I started my travel industry career with Qantas Airways in Amsterdam, and they contacted the college I was studying at. I was finishing, and they were looking for people to join them. And of course, I was as green as they come, but they said, "Come and work for us in Amsterdam," which I did. And I worked with them for just over 2 years. It was an online station at the time, Amsterdam, had a once a week flight. And of course, that was in the late 80s. And the aircraft from Qantas Airways was going to go to Sydney, but it basically stopped everywhere it saw a light. It was non-stop flying in those days. It wasn't really happening. So from recollection, it went from Amsterdam to Frankfurt, from Frankfurt to Bahrain, from Bahrain to Singapore, from Singapore to Sydney. So it was a real milk run. But I worked for them with them for a number of years. At the same time, a friend of mine who I studied with, tourism studies, he started with Pan Am. And he worked with Pan Am in the ticket office in Amsterdam. And our offices weren't too far away from each other. And of course, as you do at that age, you catch up a lot and you go out and have a few drinks. And we used to talk about our experiences because, of course, new into work, it was just fascinating to learn from each other. And I always remember he's still a good friend of mine. And he's very excited about what we're doing with Pan Am. And he always used to say, Pan Am is just different. And he had nothing to reference or compare it against, but it's just different, Pan Am. And so he worked there for a number of years. I then, after my first year in those years at the airlines, I actually don't know if it's still the same nowadays, but after your first year, you were able to apply for discounted tickets, which of course one of the perks traveling for an airline. And I had this fascination. I wanted to fly, I wanted to travel, and I wanted to go to New York, and I wanted to go to Hawaii. Hawaii had been on my bucket list, if you call it that, for I don't know how long. Probably since I saw the first program of Magnum PI, would you believe it? I want to be there, I said. So I got my discounted tickets, and in those days there wasn't really a lot of things like taxes and security taxes. So I don't think I paid a lot of money for that at all. And I flew to New York. My mum had a half sister living there, so I was meeting her. It was the first time in New York. I was blown away with all these experiences. And then I flew from New York again on Pan Am to Honolulu, but via LA. And there I had my first experience of being offloaded, being a non-revenue passenger. Of course, I'm green behind the ears, and I'm going, so what do you do now?
So for our listeners, let's talk about what offloading is, because we've all been there. My uncle worked for Continental and then United, and we're all ready to go on a trip. And let's talk about what offloading means for some of our listeners.
So offloading, I'll tell you, it's one of the most scary experiences you ever have if you go on a plane, I think, because you just don't know that this is going to happen. You've been assured it's going to be okay. And I'm on the plane and I'm flying, and I knew it was going to stop in LA, but so what? I was checked in to go to Honolulu. And in LA, they came up to me and they said, "Oh, sorry, can you come with us?" And it was, I'm sorry, the flight was really full. And I think another airline had maybe cancelled a service to Honolulu, so she had to come up. And you got to come off the aircraft. And I said, "What do I do now?" I said, "Well, find another one." And it was like, okay, what about my luggage? That's still going to Honolulu. We can't take that out. So this was me. I was green by the ears, and I go, "What do I do now?" So I ended up phoning the office in Amsterdam at the time, and my supervisor then pulled a few strings here and there, and I think I ended up on United, and then arrived in Honolulu, and then had to go and look around for my luggage. But offloading is not a pleasant experience. But hey, you didn't pay for the ticket, so I think you just have to take it.
Sure. And also, when you actually get on a flight and it takes off, the door's shut, then you're like, okay,
exactly.
We're good.
Yeah. And you stand out. Sorry, you stand out because in those days it'd be different now, I'm sure, but you're always told you've got to dress up. So you turned up and suit and tie, and you go onto a plane. And the rest of the people just sitting there, they're looking at you going, "That's weird." But you had to.
Yeah. I remember in 2001, my uncle wanted to take us all on a trip, my whole family, and he was going to take us to Zurich. So we get to the airport, and I tell everybody, I take time off of work, and I tell everybody, "Oh, I'm going to Zurich." And then we get to the airport, and the president at the time was going to Europe, so all the flights were sold out. And he says, "Oh well, we could always get on the flight to Tokyo. Does everyone want to go to Tokyo?" So then we're going to Tokyo. We had a fantastic time, but then I get back, and everyone's like, "Oh, how was Zurich?" And I said, "Well, we didn't go to Zurich. We ended up going to Tokyo." And people are like, "What are you talking about? How do you do that?"
Yeah.
So yeah.
Amazing.
For the Pan Amers that are listening to this, the term that we use was subject to load.
Subject to load.
Subject to the load. And you didn't have computers in those days to know how many bookings they had. So you had to ask the counter or call on the phone. And they would say, you're sub-low and it doesn't look good. So that struck terror in our hearts.
Yeah. Oh, and then you would wait
That's
around
right.
and you could see all the non-revs because they're all dressed up and they're waiting in the back, like intently waiting. Every time the ticket agent would get the microphone, this is it. This is it. But once that door shut, you felt like you hit the jackpot.
Yeah, and as you say, you're waiting at the desk, and then they say, "Well, just sit down." But then somebody else walks up and starts talking, and they're smiling and they're laughing. You go, "What do they know?" And I don't know. Starts.
Yeah.
It wasn't good.
Oh yeah. She's getting her friends on the flight.
This
They're
is
gonna
it.
bump us.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. But yeah, so that was my first time with Pan Am, and then actually I flew with them again because a year later in Amsterdam, it's some travel event. I can't remember what it was now. I actually won a prize. I won a prize to go to with Pan Am to Sint Maarten in the Caribbean, which of course was overly exciting. And I was going to go with a friend, and literally, I think a month before it was that year, it must have been, I don't know, 1989 or so. They had a really bad weather, and the island was half destroyed, I think. So we couldn't go to St. Martin. And Pan Am was very helpful and said, "Well, where do you want to go?" So we settled on Miami, and we flew to Florida. Had never been. Flew to Florida, and we rented a car and drove around, and it was an amazing trip. On that return flight, again, my friend wasn't in the industry, and I said to him, "Oh, we need to dress up," and he was looking at me a bit puzzled. I said, "No, you need to dress up for this flight. We haven't paid for it. We need to look right." And I still have a photo somewhere. I was standing outside of Miami Airport, dressed up in the heat with a tie, and he looked really uncomfortable in it. But we went to the desk and it was all fine. We got the seats. I think it must have been a higher category because it was a prize-winning seat or whatever. And then as we got on, they said, "Oh, so you've been upgraded." And we went to business, well, business class at the time. And that was just like, this is amazing. And my friend thought I was, I knew the world, and everybody was, I was in with the right people. It was amazing.
Becky, any travel stories you'd like to share about flying non-rev?
Well, like Gary said, traveling was very expensive. And I flew in the 70s. I was working for Pan Am in the 70s. So we picked out the farthest flung places that we could think of, the most exotic, the most out of the way. We probably wouldn't ever get there again if we had to pay for the ticket. They were very helpful to the employees, the staff that was on duty. They were very helpful to the employees, but nevertheless, it was a nail-biting time. And when you were waiting to be called to get on board, but boy, when you did and you got your trip going, it was just so incredibly exciting to be young, to be that age that Gary's talking about, and it really gives you the bug.
No, I totally agree, Becky. It's a way of if you look back on it now, you sort of go, that was actually quite a lot of fun. At the time, of course, as you say, it was nerve-wracking, but you went to places, you had the ability to go to places that many of your friends who weren't in the industry were just going, "How do you do all that?" And then once you got the taste for that, as you say, you got the bug, and you can't leave. It just stays in you.
Very true. So Becky and I did an episode 51, and it was titled "Crossing the Atlantic in 1939 and Making History Once More." And what Becky and I did was explore some of the first flights of crossing the Atlantic Ocean with a Boeing 314 flying boat. In July of 2024, Travel and Leisure had a headline, and I'm going to read it. "Pan Am is back. and is launching a luxurious transatlantic private jet trip next year. So let's talk about Pan Am coming back in the air. I can't wait to see this plane with Pan Am livery on it. Gary, why don't you take us off? And Becky, why don't we talk about history while Gary is talking about this trip?
Fantastic. Well, let me do a few steps back to because people will be interested in why we wanted to do this, and also the fact that we've actually started the process of this idea of doing a trip that celebrates the Pan Am legacy. Way before the pandemic, we started talking about it internally, and it was late 2019 that we got in touch with the museum, and we spoke to Linda Prayer at the time and discussed our plans, and incredible support we received with the idea. And of course, also a huge dose of realism. Can this actually happen? Can you make this happen? Will this work? And of course, then the whole world stopped with COVID. And to be totally honest, I think all of us in our business thought, well, that's probably the end of that. The feeling of momentum might be gone a little bit. What do we do once this is all over? And who knows when it's over? What are the priorities going to be? And it was only in 23 that we said, okay, let's pick it up again. Do we still want to do this? Yes, we do. We think it's an exciting idea. Let's work on it again. And that's when the process started of developing this idea. And of course, the Pan Am legacy is so considerable that when you sit down and say, well, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? It's there's so many choices. Where do you start? And we felt that a celebration of what Pan Am stood for should start with some of the things that they were quite incredible at. And that was just getting on with things and getting it done. And the Transatlantic tour is a real, testimony of that, because it was also for us the case of saying, well, we're going to continue with it. Like Pan Am said, we're going to fly across the Transatlantic to Europe. We said, we're going to do this tour. And that's why we came up with it. It's historical. The flying boats, which particularly in those days, I mean, that was just extraordinary. And even more so because, of course, after the war had finished, the whole rise of the flying boats reduced significantly because, part runways on land became the way of flying. So to celebrate the flying boat history, I think was a really important part for us, and with that, celebrating the legacy of Pan Am.
Well, Gary, I'd like to add here that this crossing the Atlantic truly made Pan American an international carrier. They were already in the Pacific, but the Atlantic had the most difficult weather, and it was the most challenging to design equipment could cross this large expanse of ocean. But I'd also like to remind listeners that they are living in this history every day when they take a flight, because it was during the days of the flying boats that Pan American styled the boats in a nautical fashion. And so you used the terminology. You had a captain who was the head of everything. You had the port and starboard. You had galleys, and all of those terms are still in use in aviation today. And that started out right here with Pan American during the flying boat era.
So, Gary, why don't we talk a little bit about this incredible opportunity it sounds like an incredible trip. I wish I could afford it. Tracing the Transatlantic.
Thank you, Tom. What we did was we looked at, as I said, some of those, as Becky calls it, pivotal moments, and the Transatlantic was, and the history behind it, and I'm sure Becky can talk more about, is this desire by One Trip at the time to open these routes, the I guess the reluctance of the British at the time, because they wanted the Brits to be the first one going at the Atlantic. But it just seemed, without having ever met the guy, but having read a number of books and done the research, it just seemed one of those really determined individuals. And so when we started to look at that, we said, okay, well, there's a wonderful itinerary here for a touring experience. And I'll come to that touring experience in a minute, but if I look at the itinerary, say there's a wonderful itinerary here that will take us to Europe, but it would probably be rather uninteresting to go back the same way we came. So what about combining that with the second journey that was created, which was the northern route? Started with the southern route, then the northern route, and combined them, and we'll make it a round trip from New York. And that's exactly what we did. And I do always highlight the point that the itinerary is inspired by those transatlantic routes, both south and north, because some of the destinations possibly less interesting nowadays. For example, the one trip son Ed suggested that perhaps Bermuda would be something that added a bit more flavour to the itinerary than, for example, the Azores. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but we created it around Bermuda, Bermuda, of course, being one of the flying boat destinations. And if you then go to the northern route, the flying boats used to end up in Southampton, but in the UK, that's probably less interesting than going to London and learning about what the operations were for Pan Am. But one of the things I really like in this itinerary, one of the many things I like, is going to Foynes Island, where they have a replica flying boat. It's the only one of its kind in the world. I visited the museum, and extremely passionate owner, Margaret, showed me around. And lo and behold, you're on the estuary where the flying boats used to land. The control tower is still there and part of the museum. And that's the final overseas stop on the program. And I think extremely fitting and a very special experience.
Sure. If I can interject really quick about Foynes, because Margaret was one of my very first interviews, episode 3, titled Flying Boats, Irish Coffee, and a Hollywood Star. And my personal travel plans, I haven't made it there yet, but I have every intention of going there. They have a full-scale replica of the Yankee Clipper. Everything is meticulously replicated from the original down to the finest detail. I can't wait to get there. And also, Margaret has a challenge for me about how many Irish coffees I can drink before I'm drunk. So she's a lovely lady, and it's a wonderful museum. We call it one of our sister museums in the Pan Am family, and I can't wait to get there. So I just wanted to interject really quick to talk about the Foynes Flying Boat Museum and how it's awesome, and I can't wait to get there.
I actually think it's wonderful that you say that you see it as a sister museum, because the passion that Margaret has for what they're trying to do in Foynes is, and I will use the word replicated, is exactly the same as you find at the Pan Am Museum in Long Island. I find over the years that I've both been in touch and communicated with Linda and others, including yourself, but also the visits to Gala. And every time I come back from a Gala, and I've done 3 now, I think, extraordinary. Every time I come back, and my colleague said, "What was it like?" I said, you just have to be there to understand the passion for this aviation round. And I was therefore delighted that the last gala we had the operators of the aircraft for the tour, which I wanted to come to, attend the gala as well. And they said to me, "This is just extraordinary." And I said, "It is." I said, "I've never come across anything like it." So I want to step back to the tour, because it's one of those interesting scenarios, our business has been doing this for almost 10 years, creating itineraries, touring itineraries by using a private aircraft. We've never used another brand. We've done it for tour operators. We have their own idea about what a tour is all about. This is very different because here, I've said it to Linda before. I feel an enormous level of responsibility to ensure that the experience on board is as close to what people expect it should be if it's a Pan Am operated aircraft. And of course, things have changed over the years, new laws, regulations, things that you can and you can't do. But I'm really excited that I think we're getting very close to delivering something that hopefully will get a tick of approval from people that know Pan Am. In way of catering, we are actually going to have the crew in Pan Am uniforms, and the aircraft will have Pan Am branding on it. And I think it will be so exciting in that sense. So whilst the tour so often, when we create tours, about the destinations, it's about the hotels, I think this one just sort of knocks it over and says, well, actually, it's so much more this time. It is also about the experiences that the people will have by flying this aircraft. And I think that's very exciting. So that's why I wanted to mention it about the tour. When people say, where is it going? Well, you're going to all these wonderful destinations. You're going to stay in some great 5-star hotels. But it's so much more than that. It is really being part of history where a Pan Am branded aircraft will do a journey of some of the destinations that they used to go very regularly. And I think that's really exciting.
It is. Becky, let's talk about the southern route. So this trip is going New York, Bermuda, Lisbon, and Marseille. Can you talk a little bit about some of the first flights across the Atlantic with the Boeing 314 flying boat?
First of all, I just wanted to build on something that Gary said. You not only will have this fabulous onboard experience and the Pan Am, being on a plane that's in Pan Am livery, that's just, and everybody's going to be watching this. I know the towers are going to be saying special things to the pilots as they're taking off. Welcome back to the skies, and things like that. But the fact that you are flying back into history, you're reimagining for the future, but it's not only aviation history, it's also world history, because these flights started up in June of 1939. And you have to remember that Hitler invaded Poland the 1st of September. I mean, that was barely after this got going. And over time, this route, this southern route, became a lifeline for people trying to escape, out ahead of the war, and they were trying to get out of Lisbon. So this is part of this whole history that all of the passengers are going to learn as they're staying in great hotels and being served great food on board an airplane. But in terms of the routes, depending on the days of the week, just like it is today, airlines have certain routes that in certain places they go depending on the days of the week. And also during the time, it was seasonal, during the times of the year when the harbors in Canada weren't frozen, they could go up through, I think it's Shediac in Nova Scotia, and then up to Botwood in Labrador. And then they would go on and cross the North Atlantic and go over to Foynes and then on into Southampton. That was the northern route. And so sometimes it was weather contingent. And sometimes they'd get fogged in and they'd get stuck in Shediac for a few days. And so the whole thing was, when it worked, when the weather was good and cooperated, it was great. But the southern route had far more reliable weather, and that was, sometimes they flew out of Baltimore, sometimes it was New York, sometimes they stopped in Bermuda, but generally speaking, they always stopped in the Azores, and then they went on into Marseille, to Lisbon rather, and then to Marseille. So the first, proving flights were in May of 1939, right, Tom? They were carrying mail and FAA officials just to make sure that everything worked right. And then it was in June when they actually had this very fun and fancy press flight where they had members of NBC and ABC set up equipment for a live broadcast in the tail suite of the aircraft. And Tom, you have audio of that, which you can listen to. But
and our listeners can listen to episode 52. It's with Becky and I, and we cover this in great detail, and you can actually listen to the NBC broadcast.
But you had, quite a few reporters from the news services on board. And then that one was followed by June 28th, I think, was the gala passenger flight. And that was Juan and Betty Tripp and the Vanderbilts and all of the dignitaries that took that trip. So it was the southern route that both of these trips flew.
Gary, back to you. Let's talk about some of the details, the exciting, luxurious details of each of these stops on this wonderful trip.
So as you probably know, we're starting the trip in New York, and the first hotel we're going to be using, fingers crossed, is the Waldorf Astoria, which of course, in its own way, has an enormous amount of history and legacy. And I say fingers crossed because they've gone through an enormous refurb, and they keep telling us it's going to be okay, but they haven't opened yet. So we are working on a number of plan Bs in case it all goes pitong, as they say. But yeah, we arrive in New York. Everybody will arrive from their different destinations and get welcomed by the group. We have a welcome dinner where we talk a little bit about the plans for the 10-day trip ahead. And then we go to New York Airport. We're currently working. Now, I don't tell too much. I want people get a little bit excited, but we're working with JFK at this stage about the send-off from New York, and we are also talking. Becky, you mentioned earlier, Will Wings, to see what we can do with retired or previous flight attendants to join this send-off. And I think you've alluded to it. I think there'd be a lot of interest in this happening from a press point of view, but also just from the public's point of view. Have an aircraft parked at JFK Airport with the Pan Am branding on it. We'll get people asking questions, and not just aviation people, but people in general that remember the airline. And then we take off, and I expect, aside from the experience, I expect that the community of plane spotters will become a bit of a mouthpiece for this journey, because in all of these airports, there will be plane spotters seeing that, and that it will go through that community like a wildfire, I say. But it will be something that people will pick up very quickly. So as I say, first stop, Bermuda, Lisbon, then Marseille, then London, Foynes, and back to New York. We have 2-night stays everywhere, and that means you can relax a little bit, but we are going to keep going because we've got a lot to see and a lot to do. So each destination we'll go to, we're trying to include something that is Pan Am memory history. I'll start with the first one in Bermuda. We'll have an ex-flight attendant and potentially the ex-station manager from Pan Am joining the group for dinner one evening, and talk a little bit about what it was like. So we're trying to ensure that in every destination we have something that reminds people of Pan Am, but at the same time, we're also aware that not everybody will be totally aviation geeks, and there will also be people who are saying, well, I'm doing this because I want to have a nice experience, a nice vacation. And there will be a lot of Pan Am experiences on the aircraft as we speak. But that's what the plan is for the different destinations. Then what we've done is that one of the big buzzwords in travel nowadays is personalization. And of course, for anything to do with a group, that becomes actually quite a challenge, because how do you personalize an experience for a group? But I think it's really important, because when you put a group of people together that have never met before, we potentially have 50 people traveling on this trip. Some people will like A, others like B, others like C, and others people just like to do absolutely nothing. How do you cater for that? Because part and parcel of such a journey is the experiences that they're going to have, they're going to talk about and want to enjoy. Getting people to do things they don't enjoy don't tend to work. So what we've done in every destination, we're giving people options. So you have an option to go on a catamaran to cruise the waters of Bermuda. You can go with the town crier to learn about Bermuda's history, and he's quite a character, I must say. Or you can go and meet one of the locals who talks about some of their cottage industry approach to growing things. There's some fascinating things. You go through it. I'll jump on a number of destinations before I might go back on it, because there's a number of things I'm really excited about. We get to London, and I think for most people outside of Britain, and I'm sure it's the same for Americans, is the fascination with the British royal family. And of course, you have part of that royal family living in your country at the moment, if he's allowed to stay with the new administration. But so we're going to Kensington Palace. Before it opens for anybody else, we'll go to Kensington Palace and see the palace. It's Kensington Palace is the home to William and Kate, and so we're going to have the time. I was very lucky earlier this year last year, sorry, at an event. I had an opportunity to walk around the palace, and it is quite extraordinary. So we're going to have time there before anybody else arrives to go and look around, and then that's then followed by a morning brunch style thing. And we're going to have a presentation by an ex-royal butler to talk about etiquette in the British household. And I think that sort of stuff is just what adds flavour to what is an aviation experience and an aviation commemorative journey, to have some other things. And I think that's really, really important from our perspective. I won't tell you what we're doing in Foynes because I'm going to make you jealous, Tom, if you haven't been yet. But I think it's going to be spectacular as well at the museum.
Well, I intend to go out and get a lottery ticket. And if I win, then Becky and I are going on this trip.
I love it. Fantastic.
Could I add something here, Tom?
Of course.
About Gary was talking about the etiquette in the the royal households and all of that. And I will say that on Pan American, etiquette was extremely important because your passengers on these boats were people like Lady Mountbatten and her daughter Pamela, and the Empress of Austria's children, and the Baron de Rothschild and his family, and the French couturier Elsa Schiaparelli, and the French automaker Louis Renault. You're really talking about the creme de la creme of European society. And so I think deportment was very important. Dress for the stewards on board. All of those things were critical when Pan American was getting started.
I love that you say that, Becky, because I think one of the things that nowadays with travel and including flying, it's become a commodity. It's you fly somewhere because you've got to get somewhere. Whilst back in those days, it was glamorous, and I think that was what Pan Am did. They were still an airline that made flying glamorous, and I think creating this program, this tour, is saying it's not just about flying to a place. It's wonderful, of course, because I have this big belief that when people travel, you connect cultures, you connect religion, history, and I think that's a real powerful thing that needs to happen. So we're doing that with the tour, but we're also doing it in style, and we're saying actually flying is going to be a fun experience on this trip. And that, to me, and that's consistent through all the programs that we run, which are even the ones that are not Pan Am, is when we talk to our clients to say, this is flying how it used to be, that you actually want to go to the airport rather than going, I wish I wasn't going. I want to go to the airport. I want to get back on the plane. Of course, in this case, with these tour programs, the crew will be the same. So you get to know them. As a matter of fact, we're inviting the crew to join the guests on this tour.
Oh,
on
interesting.
On the first night in Bermuda. So I've learned over many years, it creates a really nice relationship. So when people come back on the aircraft, they go, I remember that person, or I had a chat with them yesterday, and it creates a really wonderful bond. Again, it's something that you just don't do nowadays anymore. You get on the plane, you get off. Next time you get on, there'll be other crew. So here'll be the same crew. And they gradually get to know you. They'll talk about, I know that Tom, when he comes on the plane, he wants to have a Bloody Mary. I'll make sure it's ready for him. It's those sort of things that will then occur. And I think that's the difference with these sort of programs. And that's really what we're trying to create. It's the often used term of, travel of a bygone era. But it is a bit like that. It is a bit, as Becky was saying, it's something special. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the guests will make a real effort to make it special themselves, because it is a unique, it's a historical journey.
Mm-hmm. And most pilots don't come back and talk to passengers anymore. I mean, obviously there's the security issue, but my good friend Captain Bo Brandt of United Airlines, the flying piano player, he was also a guest on one of the podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
He makes it a point, and he said that he learned this from some of his Pan Am mentors, pilot mentors that grew up in his neighborhood. He makes it a point to go and talk to passengers before and after the flight. And he brings his iPad and talks about the route that they're going on. That's how it used to be. The pilots would always come back and socialize with the passengers, and it was all part of the experience. Becky, do you have any insight on that you'd like to add?
Well, I think I don't recall too much of that. I was usually busy in the galley or getting things ready for service. But they did come down. The pilots did come down and interact, with people. And they also appeared, if there was something that occurred in flight that wasn't supposed to, if some passengers got into an argument or something like that, then he would come out in full regalia. And there was a great deal of respect for that when that happened. And a particular incident I'm thinking of, a friend of mine was on a flight going out to Guam from Honolulu, and Muhammad Ali was going to the Thrilla in Manila to fight the Thrilla in Manila. And he had brought along his mistress and not his wife. But the wife found out about it and booked a ticket in economy.
Oh, my.
And once they were airborne, there was a confrontation that the captain had to come out and settle. But at any rate, the Pan Am uniforms had carried a great deal of visual weight because they were designed after a Navy captain.
Mm.
And with all the scrambled eggs on the brim and the black jacket, the white, shirt and black tie. So that was a direct link to the Navy. Juan Trippe had a great fondness for it because he was in the Navy himself. And so when he was styling the boats, the pilots used to wear these bomber jacket things. But when the boats came out, they went to the naval officer uniforms.
And Gary, what's really exciting and fascinating about this trip of yours is kind of a modern take on what Pan Am would be like if it was still flying. As you said, it's inspired, and that's really, really fascinating. Some of our listeners will laugh because I often talk about food. So, Gary, I want to talk about the food on this trip. But before that, one of the things that just occurred to me is we haven't told our listeners how many days this trip is. If you can tell us kind of the logistics and the dates, and then also the website, and then we can talk about my favorite subject, which is food.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, it's the tour starts in New York on the June the 16th. So it's in about 5 months' time. We've still got some availability for those that are interested. I'll give you the details on where to get in touch with us in a moment. We have one night either side in New York, and then we basically got 2 nights in each destination. So you've got 2 nights in Bermuda. We're staying at the Fairmont Hotel in Bermuda. We've got 2 nights in Lisbon, where we stay in the Four Seasons in Lisbon. We've got 2 nights in Marseille, which was the end of the southern route, where we stay in the Sofitel. We've got 2 nights at the Savoy in London. Then we've got 2 nights at Adar Manor in Ireland before we return to New York. So the total duration of this trip is 12 days. And we have a fully inclusive price of just under $60,000 per person. Well, singles are very welcome. And as a matter of fact, I understand we have a high number of singles on the tour already. We work with our partner in the US. It's a company called Criterion Travel. And on their website, criteriontravel.com/Pan Am, you can find all the details.
In the episode description, there is a link to that website to make it easy for our listeners.
Fantastic. That's great. So, so food. Do you want to talk about
My favorite
that?
subject. Yeah, let's talk about
Let's talk
food.
about food. But this has been fascinating. So, in my during my last visit to New York, when I went to the gala, and then the day after that, I received boxes and boxes of old Pan Am menus, and I went through those, and that was fascinating. A courtesy again of the museum and Linda, which I'm very grateful for. And I said to her, I really want to see what was done in the past, what can we do in the future, and what fits the sectors that we fly. You know, what did you do for a short sector? What did you do for a longer sector? And so I went through them. I took lots of photos, and together with the airline, we're putting together a menu because a lot of it's governed by what's possible nowadays and also the sector length. But I think they'll do a really good job on this. I have been told that we are able to do a caviar service, which I think Pan Am used to do. So we'll have a caviar service.
For our listeners, Becky is giving the thumbs up on our screen here.
We think Becky likes the caviar. But one of the things I thought was really is interesting, and I was reading it. It gives you sort of joy when you read these menus. Apart from the fact you become quite packaged and hungry and think, actually, I'd like some of that. But it was the thing that stuck in my mind. I said to Linda, "What was that?" And it said something like champagne snack. And I went, what is a champagne snack? And it was wonderful with canapes and it just, I loved it. I said, I want to use that term because it just sounds so cool. Let's have a champagne snack on the aircraft. Say that to my wife, she'd probably go and say, yes, let's have a champagne snack. Yeah. Yeah. There goes the seller.
Well, I just wanted to ask Gary real quick. I presume that you can take off anytime you want, right? So that these are going to be take off will be during food consumption hours. In other words, not in the middle of the night where you're expected to enjoy a champagne snack with caviar, 2:00 in the morning, right?
Exactly. Becky, great question and comment actually there, because of course all our flying is daytime. And you are right. Within limitations, we choose our flight times. And generally speaking, that is around meal times. And on this aircraft, on this journey, it's mainly around lunchtime. But then you've got a number of fairly short flights. So, for example, I think the shortest flight we've got on this journey is between London and Shannon in Ireland to go to Foynes. So that means that either before or after we'll have a meal organised. I think in this case it will be after. So when we arrive in Ireland, we'll have a lunch, but we'll have possibly the champagne snack on that background.
And what aircraft is this?
This is a Boeing 757. So the airline that operates it is a division of Iceland Air, and they've been operating 757s for many decades now. And this aircraft has been totally converted into VIP configuration. So it's got 50 lie-flat seats in a 2x2 configuration, so it's very spacious. And the one reason we picked this, amongst many, we picked this particular aircraft is it's got what they call a buddy seat. So if you're sitting in this seat for takeoff and you want to meet with some friends or people you met on the trip, or you want to talk to the tour leaders of the trip, or the pilot, the captain comes along, there's a seat in front of you where somebody can sit. It's not a lie flat, so it's just a proper seat. But you can have a table out. You could play cards if you wanted to. You can share photos, or somebody can come and have a champagne snack or something like that. So it's a wonderful social experience, and I can't stress that enough, because you go on a plane trip like this, it's a party. It's a wonderful experience of sharing memories with fellow travelers and like-minded people. Clearly, if you go on a tour like this.
Mm-hmm. And Becky, this sounds very familiar, because that's how the flying boats were. They were just a party and a social hour, and people would play games and chat and socialize. And they didn't have headphones back then, and they actually had to talk to each other. Right.
And they are recreating the atmosphere that you would have found on board the 314, which was very congenial. The lounge on the 314 could seat 14 for dinner, I guess, but they could convert it back and forth from setting up tables for dining and then putting the tables away, and you had a lounge or maybe a table or two for cards and games. And they did 2 or 3 dinner seatings, where they would put out a 3-course meal. So, that whole sense of almost a clubby atmosphere where you could go up to the lounge, and if you couldn't sleep, see who's up and have a conversation with somebody you've never met before, and you've made a new friend.
And just for our listeners, a Pan Am fact, Pan Am never flew a 757, but with the Pan Am livery, we can add that to our history after this trip.
Absolutely. Love the way you think, Tom.
Tell us, I know you're still developing the menus, but just give us a little taste of some of the unique courses that you are considering either in the air or on the ground.
Well, we've got a number of on the ground. If I start with those, we have a number of celebratory dinners as we go along, special events, whether it's in Bermuda on the beach, or whether it is a high-end meal at the museum in Foynes, and a few ones in between. So it's one of those scenarios where you think, well, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, but you can also overdo it. People do want to have the time maybe just to have a normal meal and have an early night if we're flying the next day. So we're trying to find that balance, what we do in the destination. Also bearing in mind that we really want people to enjoy the flying experience. Now, one of the things that I found when I was looking at those menus is things like lobster were very high on the list, and beef tenderloin. Of course, the old Chateaubriand being carved at your seat. I tried every angle to make that happen. You just can't get on the plane with a knife of that size nowadays, whether it's a private plane or not. But we might have found a way of trying to emulate it. But I won't say too much about that just yet, because if we can't do it, then I will be disappointing people. But it's that style of dining. It is like dining in a fine dining restaurant, and that's the way we want to display it, not an airline meal as we expect to get it if we don't have to pay for it and buy it on board. So it is something that it's got to be part and parcel of the experience. And if you think about the sectors, predominantly they're quite short sectors. We've got 2 longer sectors from Bermuda to Lisbon and from Foynes back to New York. Those are the ones where we can really do something special. The rest are quite short. But again, that doesn't mean we can't do nice little touches that make people really think, I'm traveling, and I'm traveling Pan Am style.
Do you know what kind of champagne you're pouring yet?
Well, we have a whole range of options. There's what the airline calls their house champagne, which we've said, no, never heard of it. We won't be having that. So they've gone through a whole range of different types. At this stage, we haven't decided. I like a glass of champagne, so I want to make sure it's good and it's in keeping with the Pan Am experience. And of course, looking again at the menu, Pan Am had different Pan Am champagne brands over the years as well. Everything from a Moet to more like a Bollinger style champagne. So we'll get something, a proper champagne to be part of it.
Wasn't Bollinger James Bond's favorite champagne? And he
It
did
was,
fly
yes,
Pan
it's one of
Am,
them.
we know. So
He did fly Pan Am. It was Dom Perignon and Bollinger. So
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I think he went back and forth. So
Is there one of the movies Pan Am in? There's a Dr. No. Was Pan Am in Dr. No?
Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Live and Let Die, License to Kill. I don't know anything about James Bond, right?
No. Excellent.
Gary, personal question for you. So I can hear the passion in your voice about this project. How do you feel about having this enormous responsibility with this legacy of Pan Am that you are now essentially bringing Pan Am back into the skies in a certain point of view?
As I said earlier, I do feel the weight of responsibility on our shoulders, and I have very much driven the point that this has got to be perfect, and that's not so much for me, but it's more a recognition of celebrating such a celebrated brand, if that's the right way to write it, to say that. So there is an enormous weight of responsibility in that sense, and all we can do between now and the journey is to ensure that we cross all the T's, and make sure that we do as much as we can do to make this a memory where people come back off that journey and go, "Wow, that would just be incredible if that was a reaction." And even better, I'd love to do this again. We have other plans for Pan Am journeys in the future, but I think a lot of it will rest on how it is accepted when we operate it. And it's always, there's a level of expectation around this, particularly for those people that have either worked or are strongly associated with Pan Am. And to all those people who are listening to this podcast, I can only say we do our very, very best. Will we be as good as you? I don't know. You were a special breed, but gee, we're going to make this an experience that's going to be unforgettable.
Becky, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just think for those of you who have been contemplating booking this trip and you're still sitting on the fence about it, hopefully what you've heard today will get you really, really excited, and you're going to your computers right now to Google Criterion Travel and check it out. But I just think that you're going to want to bone up on your World War II history, and you're going to want to check out your closet to make sure you've got some really great clothes to wear, and just make this a celebration of a first-class airline, the return to real class and elegance in the skies. And you're going to have, it'll be the trip of a lifetime.
Sounds like it. And Becky and I are available if you need a companion, as long as you're paying for it.
Well, Tom, aren't you going out today to buy the lottery tickets for us?
Yes, that's my backup plan. But
I love it. I'll let you know.
Gary, anything you'd like to add about our interview?
No, Tom, no, thank you. Thank you very much. And Becky, thank you very much for adding all that additional information. I think it really supports what we're doing. And it's been from the very beginning, particularly with the museum, it's been extremely supportive. I should also mention the Historical Foundation, Ed, who's been very supportive of what we're doing. And that's really fantastic, because it gives you an additional layer of I guess support and interest. And so say we still have some seats. We'd love to take some more people. We have future plans as well. And of course, I would be amiss if I didn't mention 2027, when it's 100 years Pan Am, and we're definitely looking at something particularly special for that year as well. And hopefully, if this goes well, Tom, I can come back at some stage to talk about that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Gary, for your time. Again, the episode description has the link to this fantastic trip. Becky, it's always a pleasure to have you back, and Becky will be coming more often on different episodes in the future. And thank you both very much for your time today.
Thank you, Tom. Becky, thank you. Very nice to meet you. And
very nice to meet you, Gary.
Hopefully we'll meet again.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Pan Am was a pioneer in air travel and still stands as one of the most iconic and innovative airlines in aviation history. That legacy lives on at the Pan Am Museum in Garden City, New York, where you can explore the rich history of the aircrafts and individuals at the heart of the company known as the world's most experienced airline. For more information about the Pan Am Museum, check out our website at www.thepanammuseum.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. As was once a tagline in one of our commercials, we would greatly appreciate your support to help the Pan Am Museum continue making the going great. You can also support the museum by shopping on our online store for all things Pan Am, accessories, apparel, jewelry, books, models, and posters. We want to hear from you. If you have a question for us or want to share your story, our email address is podcast@thepanammuseum.org. As flight crews once said to passengers departing for their destinations around the world, thank you for flying, Pan Am.